Okay, we're good. Are we live? Can you hear me? All right, welcome to the History Hootenanny. Thank you for coming to our mini lecture this morning.
Good morning, folks. Just want to give a quick that's also going on at 10:30. We've got our first children's story time. That's in the history headquarters, and our bats, baseballs, and wheels walking tour that'll be out on the front porch with Miss Laura Still. She's standing out front with her microphone, so just meet up with her. That starts at 10:30. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. It's my profound honor to be able to introduce our next speaker, our first speaker for the History Hootenanny lecture series today, which we're also recording, just so everybody knows, so that we can put it on YouTube later, is a good friend of mine, Dr. Renee Kesler. She has far too many accolades to list in an introduction, I've come to understand. But she's worked for the city, she's worked for the University of Tennessee. The work that she's done, particularly on Knoxville and urban renewal, is incredible and unparalleled. And I think she's also the director, of course, of the Beck Cultural Center, which was established in 1975 to sort of chronicle the African-American experience in East Tennessee, and in particular in Knoxville. And I think Renee's done an excellent job doing that. And a mutual friend of Renee's and mine, when I first came here, is Dr. Bob Booker. And before he passed, he told me when I first met, and I was interested in talking about the African-American experience and how we could partner with Renee and with Beck. And he told me that Renee was one of the most capable and brilliant historians he had ever met. And I just wanted you to know that, Renee. And so I have had a great pleasure in working with Renee. And actually, after Bob told me that is when we had lunch. So I was very, very pleased to get to meet Renee and to work with Renee. And so it's my pleasure now to bring her to the stage to share with us some of the history of the Knoxville Giants. I'm very eager to learn about this. In fact, I have my Giants hat at home, and I wish I'd worn it. But anyway, without further ado, Dr. Renee Kesler, who's also a reverend.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Doctor, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I'm so honored to be here, to have the opportunity to talk. I guess I need to, I'll do this. Yeah. To talk a little bit about baseball. And it said swinging through history. So first, hello there. Seeing some great friends in the room, and I appreciate it. History, so much about history. So for those of you who may not know about the Beck Culture Exchange Center, as Warren said, the Beck has been around for 50 years now. So I stand on the shoulders of extraordinary people. In order to talk about baseball or sports or anything, we kind of have to begin to talk about the history of this area, how we got here and how we got into even having the conversation about sports and about baseball. So as we know, Knoxville was founded in 1791. And at the founding of Knoxville, of course, there were enslaved people and there were free people here, many that came through and worked in various industries and trades. Knoxville was a unique part of the state in terms of its topography and how things were matriculated here. But notwithstanding, initially it felt like race relations were cohesive somewhat, if you can say that. Certainly, God bless you, compared to some of the other places. Suffice it to say, prior to the Civil War, the most important industry and certainly the most important institution among African Americans is going to be the church. Do you need me to come up a little bit more? Do I need to speak up? Okay. Probably one of the most important institutions in the city, and indeed, probably if we looked at the entire history, particularly of African Americans, it'll be the church. The church will be the first institution that many will come to know for all of the activities that happen within life. So for example, in Knoxville, the very first church built in 1845 is going to be Warner Tabernacle Church. It's not greater, I'm hesitating because the name's gonna change over the years, but Warner Tabernacle is how it begins in 1845. It's located on a street called Fuller Street. And it's going to be the site of the Underground Railroad here in Knoxville. So we placed a marker there back in about 2016, 2017 to commemorate that spot as the first church. And it's important because from the church, many other institutions are going to come. For example, from the church, you're going to get your schools. From the church, you're going to get all of your other churches and denominations. In fact, this church, Warner Tabernacle, today is Greater Warner Tabernacle AME Zion Church. And so you get the different denominations, and so it will come out of there, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But within the church is where you're going to get your information, your institution. It's where they're going to have the picnics, the parties, the games. Everything happens at the church. Jobs, housing, food, money, whatever you need, the church is going to be that. And so from that initial church in Knoxville, many churches are going to come out of that, many denominations. So it's a safe space, if you will. Suffice it to say, as we come on down through history and we get to emancipation, and so prior to that, they're playing games, right? They're creating things that we may not call baseball, that we may not call football, we may not call basketball, but they're playing games and they're very athletic, and they're using this athleticism to really begin to find that pastime, if you will. The Civil War will come here in Knoxville. Now, in Knoxville, we commemorate not because it's the only date or there are not other dates that certainly the history will bear record of when emancipation takes place in the state of Tennessee, certainly, but on August 8, 1863, we commemorate that as Emancipation Day because in Greenville, Tennessee, several enslaved will be emancipated. Former military governor Andrew Johnson, who will later become the president of the United States, will emancipate his own privately enslaved individuals. Many of them will migrate to Knoxville, and they're buried in the Knoxville College Cemetery. Knoxville College is our historic black college. It was birthed in 1875, and Knoxville College will begin not as a college, but it will begin as a school where you're going to have 4-year-olds and 40-year-olds learning for the first time, right, during early Reconstruction and post-Civil War. And so what happens is many people are going to be gathering there. Knoxville College holds a lot of history, particularly as it relates to baseball in general. In fact, our namesake, named after James and Ethel Beck. James Beck's going to be an extraordinary baseball player at Knoxville College. He comes here from Camden, Alabama in 1908, before the turn of the century, but he'll graduate from Knoxville College in the class of 1908. When he graduates, he was a great, extraordinary baseball player as well as a coach. So he will come back and do lots of coaching. Another known Black history fact about baseball with regard to Mr. Beck and sort of our connection to the Knoxville Smokies. Many years ago, back before the 1920 league, there was a league in Knoxville with the Sentinel, the newspaper, and they began to play baseball, white teams, and I apologize, I don't have the name, but I can get that for you. And he wrote them to say, we need a Negro league. We need a team so that black folks and black players can come together and begin to play. So from that, a lot of these members of this 1920 Negro League of the Knoxville Giants, Negro Southern League, Knoxville Giants, are going to be formed from that. So it's beginning to create baseball in Knoxville. We're going to create teams and formal teams and things like that. So while there was not a formal minor league team, obviously before 1920, there were all these other leagues that were happening around town trying to create leagues within Knoxville. Now, going back a little bit to our history, as Knoxville begins to, I was mentioning to you the 8th of August. So in 1863, many of those individuals will migrate here to Knoxville, and they are interred there. So we celebrate the 8th of August in Knoxville as Emancipation Day, right? As one of the dates that we know emancipation took place, though it was not statewide. Sort of the beginnings of things that are going to happen. And one of the reasons that we're able to do that is because of the records that we have. One, Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson is one of those enslaved who will migrate here to Knoxville. He starts the celebrations of 8th of August Jubilee, right? And so they begin to go to Chilhowie Park. They begin to, bring people, thousands of people come to Knoxville to celebrate. Samuel Johnson is actually the great-great-grandfather of one Ned Arter. Ned Arter is a special guest that Beck, we've been bringing here since 2015, 11 years since Beck has been doing the 8th of August. He's a descendant, a direct great-great-grandson of Samuel Johnson, one of the only ones still living, to tell us the stories, the rich stories of emancipation and what happened here. But among the history and among the stories, when they would come and they would celebrate emancipation or freedom, prior to the turn of the century and certainly afterwards, there was a game of baseball. They would play baseball. That was the pastime and that was the aftertime. And so that tradition continued this year as we made history at the Knoxville Smokies, where they had Negro League Night at the Smokies on August the 8th. And it was fitting because we had the Negro Southern League, so they gave a nod to the Knoxville Giants, who were inaugural team members of that 1920 team. But they also commemorated and celebrated the idea of freedom and the Jubilee and playing together. Even our visiting team wore their throwback uniforms and jerseys, which was really nice. So going back to that 1920 teams, much of the pictorial history that we have on that 1920 team comes from a lady named Margaret Singleton Carson. Her name is so important because when you see those pictures, any black and white pictures that you see in Knoxville of African Americans from that 1920 Negro League team, it's going to come from her. She's a high school student. She's at Knoxville Colored High School. I'll tell you a little bit about the school systems in just a second. But she's 17 years old, God bless you. And her father is among the first on the police force in Knoxville. His name is John Singleton. He would take her on ride-alongs. She absolutely loved history. He would take her on ride-alongs, and finally, for her one of her senior gifts in high school, he bought her a Brown Bell camera. This little Brown Bell camera is what took those pictures that you see, black and white pictures all over, right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's exciting because she loved history. So she talked to the players. She took pictures of the players. And really, Beck has over 50,000 artifacts that speak to Black history and culture, with about 5,000 specifically in the area of urban renewal here in Knoxville, which I've kind of skated over as well. But probably 85% to 90% of the collection we have, she is responsible for. In fact, she will, as Dr. Warren said, she will educate my predecessor, Dr. Robert Booker. She'll be his historian, his teacher, the first historian at Beck. She understood how important history was and is, and she went and collected all of this history, brought all the artifacts, had everybody bring everything they have. So really much of the history that we have at Beck are the donations that we get from all over this community and that we continue to derive as a result of her. And we have named the Margaret Singleton Carson Library in her honor. But she loved history. No one came to this city and did anything in the African American community that she did not document or that she did not preserve or conserve. And so again, much of that history is there. Now, when you go to the baseball stadium, so just before that, let me go back to the creation of Beck before I get to this baseball stadium. So Beck was created 50 years ago in 1975. So why? Why did we need a Beck Culture Exchange Center? I'm glad you asked that question. So, Knoxville is going to undergo urban renewal from 1959 to 1974. Urban renewal is a federal program that's going to be happening all over the country, and it's supposed to remove blight and slums from many substandard areas. But let's talk about what Knoxville looked like during that period, because really a lot of things were going on. But during Reconstruction, many African Americans began to build a lot of the buildings here in Knoxville, began to build housing, beautiful homes. And you'll see some of these stately homes if you come to the Beck and you can look at some of these pictures. In fact, in 1929, there was a book published about the extraordinary wealth of intellectual property here in Knoxville in terms of the educators and the doctors and the lawyers and all among the African American community. And so we talk about that sort of resilient, really in a time when the world, right, the nation is undergoing this Great Depression and all of these things are happening. There's a segment of our community that's continuing to prosper and to grow. So Beck will come along as a result of urban renewal, because in Knoxville, it'll go predominantly affect 3 areas of the city that are predominantly African American. And I say that, and I put a pin in that, because that's not all. Urban renewal actually will be 4 phases in Knoxville. And I think we have to always be careful that I'm only sharing a portion of the history, and I only have a few minutes in trying to capitalize all of this in one setting. But the truth is, we talk about the 3 that disproportionately affected the African American community in Knoxville. But the 4th urban renewal project, actually, does anyone know where that was? Not necessarily disproportionately affecting the Black community, and the historians in the room are not allowed to answer. But anyone else know where that might be? University of Tennessee. And so that's an important part of the history, and we want to make sure we tell the full breadth of the whole story. So I'm really excited about learning and discovering more of the history of the University of Tennessee and how urban renewal had its effect on this land-grant institution as well. But I don't know all the dynamics yet of urban renewal and how it affected the African American community. So certainly I want to make sure that we get that scholarly research correct. But in our estimation and the research that's been done, in those 3 phases of urban renewal, some 3,000 homes will be affected, 107 African American owned businesses, and 15 churches. And so when we talk about how it really just changed the entire community of the African American community, that's the genesis of Beck. So when all of that had been done, the people began to get together and say, if we don't begin to preserve this history, if we don't begin to come together and bring all of this history together, then it's going to be almost as though it's been erased and that it never existed. Hence the development of the Beck Culture Exchange Center. And it's named after James and Ethel Beck, 2 very influential members of the African American community, really during the 1920s and 30s. I mean, just very prominent. Again, as I said, he'll come from Camden, Alabama. Another interesting fact, Camden, Alabama, I always wonder, where are all of these people coming from Camden, Alabama, coming to Knoxville, Tennessee? She's going to come from Morristown, Tennessee, and she's going to come in. I think, well, how do they all get together? How does that geographically work? Well, I understand now that Camden, Alabama was a 2-year college, and it was a feeder school into a 4-year now Knoxville College. And so he will be coming into Knoxville College. Likewise, Morristown College it'll become a 2-year college. Again, most of these schools are going to start as regular schools until they build up. But suffice it to say, that's where she's going to go to school initially as well. So Morristown College and Knoxville College are going to play each other in sports. So I imagine Mr. Beck, who's an extraordinary sports person and very nice to look at, easy on the eyes, lady. And he will meet this beautiful woman, Ethel Beck, and she'll probably be this beautiful little cheerleader, and they'll get to know each other as they're playing sports. And there the story will go, because then she'll come to Knoxville. They'll live here, get married in 1913. He'll be the first U.S. postal worker for the state of Tennessee, African American, in 1913. And then they'll go on to do great and wonderful things, including making sure that we have this space in place for athletics. Ethel Beck was an extraordinary athletic woman. She played tennis. She played in all kinds of tournaments and won tournaments. She loved sports. He loved sports, so it's no question that they got together. Also interesting. So let me give you the dynamics of the place. In 1922, before 1922, Cal Johnson is going to be open. Cal Johnson Park, named after one Caldonia Fackler Johnson, born in 1844, dies in 1925. He's going to be born enslavement, but yet he will almost live through every period of history. So can you imagine being born in 1844, dies in 1925. Being born in 1844, so you're born enslaved. You see emancipation. Life is tough, right? Because you go from, being enslaved to now free to suffer and struggle, trying to figure life out. And he'll do that. Once he figures it out, though, he will become one of the most influential men in the city. He'll own many saloons in downtown Knoxville. He will own the very first racetrack, of course, that Knoxville has. He loves thoroughbred horses. So again, talking about sports, he loved the racetrack. He loved the horses. And we love to tell the story about his racetrack being the first here in Knoxville. And where it's located is a place called Speedway Circle, which is in East Knoxville. And it's still called Speedway Circle today. And there are houses on it. And for many years, people had no idea why it was called Speedway Circle, except that it went in a circle, right? And there were houses around it. But the truth is, that's where the racetrack was. And it's in close proximity to Chilhowie Park. So you got to follow me. So stay with me. So the very first plane that ever took off or landed in Knoxville did so from his racetrack. Anybody care to guess what plane that was? The Wright brothers. So they'll drive their plane in onto the Cal Johnson racetrack. And there's a whole story. He also was a great environmentalist. I think we would say today he loved trees. And so he named a lot of his saloons after the Lone Tree Saloon. And there were all of these tree colloquiums. And so there was this huge tree in the middle of the racetrack, but they were going to need to cut that tree down in order to get the plane. He was like, well, we're absolutely not going to cut that tree down. I mean, he was really very important to him that we not cut the tree down. Well, they discussed how much they might be able to pay for this plane landing, taking off, and flying. I think that tree can come down. We can probably find another tree somewhere else. But interesting, when he put his saloon on Gay Street here, on Main Street, Gray Street, they didn't tear the tree down. I remember the story of they actually built the sidewalks and everything that they began to build around this tree. Like the tree just came up out of the ground and it stayed there. But anyway, going back to the story of Cal Johnson, because he was this affluent gentleman, and he took his money and he created in 1922 established for Black children in Knoxville the first park that they could play in. Right? The first park for colored children, hence Cal Johnson Park. He invested a lot of his money, though the city would donate the land for him to put the park on. Well, who's the superintendent of the park? It's got to be someone who's also athletic. It will be none other than Miss Ethel Beck, who's on the board, right, to create this great, fantastic park and all the ideas and things that are going to happen. It's going to be James Beck. So all of those are going to be there as they begin to do it. Today, the park is still there. Although we call it the Cal Johnson Recreation Center, it's about in the same location. It's right next to the transit system where that original park was. And so that was also a very important part of the history. Going back now, then 1920. In 1920, it's an interesting time in Knoxville because remember, we're coming off of the Red Summer. Anybody remember the Red Summer? Remember some history of the Red Summer. So in 1919, you're going to have race riots all over the country, right? Just think about the timing of it, though. What's happening in 1918, 1919, right? We're in the middle of the Great War. We got a lot. And when we were talking about the COVID pandemic in 2020, we started talking about how history is not new, right? It just keeps repeating. And we talked a lot about how the situation that we were in during COVID-19 was the same situation we'd already been in, right? 100 years before in 1918 and 1919 when we were dealing with the Spanish flu and we were dealing with the Great World War. And what happens in 1990, as we know, is that first Great World War ends abruptly. And you got soldiers coming back home to jobs that aren't existing anymore, right? We got a lot going on in our world, and race tensions are going to fly very high as African Americans have now assumed many of these jobs and these positions. And so that summer becomes a volatile summer in terms of race relations across the country. Now remember, the National Negro League that they're going, how many times I have, I'm a preacher, I can keep going. Give me some time so when I need to start wrapping things up. That's not good. Okay, I'm gonna have to wrap fast. Okay, so let me just summarize this so I can get to this baseball real quick. Things are happening all over the country. I was going to say the National Negro League is going to be assembled in 1920. Really, right before the Southern Negro League is assembled, the National is almost a month or so before. They're happening almost simultaneously. They hear about this. They begin to organize the Southern Negro League out of Atlanta, Georgia. But what happens is that summer, right, in that 1919, with this vital race record riots that are happening all over the country, they're actually going to have to delay that season in 1919 during the riots as the 1920. That's one of the reasons why that National Negro League is going to not be able to do things, because it's a lot going on during that time. So we're coming off of that. Knoxville will become one of the Red Summer Cities because we too will have a national race riot, here over one Maurice Mays. But suffice it to say, in 1920, William Brooks is going to be the general manager who's going to help form this team. He will go to Atlanta, Georgia. He's from Knoxville. He's a principal at Green Elementary School. Green Elementary School still stands today. It stands on top of the hill. So literally you can look up the hill and see it was formed in 1909. It's named after one Henry Morgan Green, a great physician who actually is one of the ones known for having cured pellagra, a disease that affected people all over the world. Extraordinary doctor right here in Knoxville. He is going to be the principal at school. He's not only that, he's a renowned, distinguished gentleman. And so everybody knew him. And so when you go to the baseball stadium, you're going to see a statue of him at the new Knoxville Smokies home place of the new Covenant Health Park. You'll see a picture of this distinguished gentleman. He is the one who will form the team. He's an executive with the Negro Southern League in Atlanta, Georgia. So he is who will put Knoxville in the league. Then you'll go to the statues and you'll see lots of statues of other ball players, and they're intentionally chosen because that year in 1920, though some may want to contest it, but the Knoxville Giants will win the league that year. They will be the league champions in 1920. Now, on that team, one of my favorite players is One Wing Maddox. Forrest Maddox is his name, but they call him One Wing. And when you go to see this beautiful statues at the park, you're going to see this baseball player with just one arm. His arm is going to be amputated in an accident, but watch this. He's going to be 10 years old when that happens. Now think about it. He was an extraordinary baseball player. He loved baseball from the very beginning. He's going to be playing baseball up until he's 10 years old. It's one thing to play baseball if you were born without, an arm or with some kind of a disability, and that's all you know, right? And then you learn to play a game. But we're talking about a kid who knew how to play baseball with two arms. And then all of a sudden, you only have one. But he will take that tragedy and become a professional baseball player. Imagine that. And so I love his extraordinary story because it really can inspire all of us to greatness, no matter what your situation. And it was very important to me to make sure that we highlighted Forrest One Wing Maddox. And Beck had the only picture that existed of him that we took in 1920. And when you see our table that's over at the center, that's over being manned right now, you'll see a picture of him that, of course, Miss Margot Singleton Carson took. And then you'll see a picture picture of him actually hitting. And there's the stories of how he would catch. He's one of the champions in the league that year, and so he's credited with being one of the best players on that team. Right next to Still Arm Dickey, who you will find out there as well. These players were all selected for that 1920 champion team that was great. So I want you to go there and see those, and then you'll see Nat Rogers, one of the older players, the oldest league, because what happens with Negro baseball is that it's going to go through iterations. It starts in 1920, but you're going to have 1920, 21 team, and then it's going to skip, and it's going to go 26, it's going to 27, 31, then come back in 35. And we have a picture of the 1935 team, and we were able to honor some of the family members of some of those team members during the 8th of August because we were able to see them. Just like the National League Baseball, it goes through different iterations. And what's happening is things are happening in the world. And so as they begin happening, as the war goes on, as the depression goes on, the game stops being played and then it picks back up. Then you start having, integration and different things like that. So there's all of these different changes. But here's what I want to leave you with. From that original professional team, minor league baseball team that was here, we get a lot of the history, and I definitely want you to go to the park to see that history there. But then you're going to have the little league teams, and they are so important. The little league team in 1951, it's going to be the first team. We have a picture that I want to share with you, especially if you come to the Beck or if you go there, you'll see a picture of all 4 of those little league teams that started. It's the Giants, the Dodgers, the Indianapolis, the Indians, and the Pirates. All right, there's 4 teams. And there's a picture, and I'm sorry I don't have it with me, but it's a great picture. It has every single kid that's there that day. Where Green School is today is on top of the hill. That used to be called Payne Avenue. So this was called the Payne Avenue Little League. Why? Because the street was called Payne Avenue. And that's where the recreation center was before they moved into a recreation center down here for Cal Johnson later on in honor of Cal Johnson, who was in that area. So those kids are going to be up there playing on game day. This spring league in 1951 is monumental. They get their own hats, they get their own uniforms, they get cleats. They all get sponsored by the American Legion, actually sponsors this. And so you have the coaches and you have everybody up there playing the first Little League, it ever happened, creating the first Little League in Knoxville. And again, coming off of much of that history, Cecil Gross and those folks who were there knew about the Knoxville Giants and those teams, and they were affiliated. So they create this Little League team. Now, from that, in 1953, an all-star team is finally put together of each of these teams. They put together an all-star team league, these little 12-year-old kids, and for the first time, they're going to go to Chilhowee Park and play a game. An all-black kids team with a superstar team with an all-white kids superstar team. They go play together in Chilhowee Park in 1953. It had not happened in Knoxville before. And what's interesting about Chilhowee Park, let me hurry and quickly go back so you can understand the dynamics. August 8, 1863 is the day of emancipation in the state of Tennessee. That date is carried all the way down through history. And during legal segregation on August 8th is the only day when Chilhowee Park was a year-round fairground that black people could go to Chilhowee Park. So my predecessor remembers that, going to Chilhowee Park one day a year on the 8th of August. And that will continue until it eventually comes 1 week and until legal segregation in Knoxville, integration, and then we all begin to go to the park together. But go back to that date. So that's why that Chilhowee Park is so important, because it's really a big part of our history and what took place and how things were happening. So to me, it's very special that not only did the first plane come off his railroad track fly across Chilhowee Park, the kids couldn't go. Mr. Booker and them talked about how that was like Christmas, right, in the summer to get to go to Chilhowee Park. Interesting, another little note here. It was the only day that black people could go to Chilhowee Park. However, when they went, white people were there, which shows you how ridiculous segregation was, right? So no black people were there on any other day, but white people were there on the one day, and they played fine together, and it was a wonderful day for many people who remember that date. And so those kids went there and played that team in 1953. So it was very important for me so that children and kids could see an all-star team. So when you go to the stadium, you'll see statues of that Little League team of each of those players. And we intentionally made sure that we highlighted children because they are the ones who are keeping the game going. And it truly is America's game. Are there any questions? I know I'm over time now. I can see you on the edge of your seat. Renee Kesler can keep talking. Any questions I can answer for anyone before? Any thoughts? Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure everybody knew.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Miss Carolyn.
I liked all of it. I liked learning about the different parts of baseball when it happened.
Yeah.
With my dad in baseball, researching and stuff. I love it. Go to games. They're always fun to watch.
Thank you so much, Miss Carolyn. Yes.
I just want to make sure everybody knew that the History Express, our shuttle, is going to be stopping out at Beck today.
Yes.
So you can take a trip out there.
You can take a trip. Yeah, and there's some pictures on the wall there, so you'll be able to see that as well. And we have a short film, if you have time. It's 21 minutes that you can also see as well. So thank you for that. And thank you all so much.